I call the member for Richmond.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. And for my contribution, the address and reply, I'd like to initially focus on the election and say how honoured I am to have been re-elected as a federal member for Richmond. And I'd like to start by thanking the people of Richmond for the incredible privilege of representing, advocating and being their voice in this parliament. And the electorate of Richmond is made up of remarkable individuals and vibrant communities from Tweed Heads right through to Ballina. Deputy Speaker, I'm a proud member of the Australian Labor Party and I want to thank all our local members and supporters for their continued faith in me. Also to my wonderful loyal staff, to Reese, Inga, Kylie, Jürgen, Marie, David, Rani, Jack and Peter and Max, thank you. In my election campaign locally, I promised to keep working hard to make the North Coast an even better place to live, and I'm determined to keep doing just that. Every day I continue to fight for our local community and I remain committed to fighting for better services and outcomes right across the North Coast and for the people of regional Australia who have been forgotten by this government. And I'll detail some of the election commitments later in my contribution, ones that I want this government to fund in my region. My focus is very much on job creation in our area. We need further investment in infrastructure. We need greater training and education avenues, and we need to keep our regional economies strong and viable so there are increasing employment opportunities. Now, in terms of the election, I've said this many times to the people of the North Coast, my door is always open and my assistance is always there. In terms of the Parliament and in the broader community, Labor will continue to hold this government to account and will also continue to define what we stand for and our values. Since the election, Deputy Speaker, amongst my community on the North Coast, there's a prevailing feeling that the only agenda this government has is a harsh and cruel one. This government is defined by the people they're against and the Australians who they impact detrimentally by their actions. And this will be the legacy of this government, as well as their lack of action on important matters. They're not fixing the NDIS, they're not fixing the NBN, they're not reversing their cuts to pensions, they're not reversing the cuts to the ABC and SBS, they're not properly investing in our schools, TAFEs and universities, and they're not properly investing in our health and hospital services. They have no plan to effectively act on climate change, and they have no plan for regional jobs and no plan to sustain and grow regional economies. Yet what we do have from this government is a continued attack on workers by pushing for cuts to penalty rates and workers' conditions. Also, Deputy Speaker, as large parts of Australia suffer the worst drought on record, the Morrison government's inaction has caused distress in so many communities who are facing severe water crises. We are so concerned by the reports of towns locally and nationally facing the possibility of running out of water and the loss and suffering they are experiencing now. After 6 years of inaction on water security, the Morrison Liberal National Government continues to waste time when communities are desperate, they are running out of water. And when it comes to rural and regional towns and their water, the fact is this government is so out of touch. We urgently need a practical plan to cope with the drought crisis because our regional communities are hurting. The government needs to act now. It is that urgent. Also, this government, the Morrison government, has a very shameful economic record. The fact is the economy has floundered for years under the Liberals and Nationals, and the government has no plan to fix it. Their record is defined by slow growth, stagnant wages, weak productivity, higher unemployment and underemployment, surging net debt and higher household debt. And Australians are very worried about their wages, their job security and their cost of living. But again, this government is doing nothing. They have no plan to meet the economic challenges facing our nation and no agenda to build a bigger and stronger Australia. Deputy Speaker, there are many people in my community who experience so many issues with so many services, particularly Centrelink, and the stories from families and pensioners are becoming far too common. The ongoing erosion of Centrelink resources has put enormous pressure on its ability to meet and address the issues of many of my constituents who find themselves in critical need. This is particularly evident for those locals who have to apply for either age pensions or disability support pensions, with massive unacceptable delays occurring. And of course the same is said for the NDIS, with its unnecessary and huge unacceptable delays, which is often putting people's lives and well-being at risk. Under this government, we've seen a lack of funding for the NDIS and a lack of planning. We've seen their staffing caps. What it needs to be doing is fixing that and delivering for the people who desperately need the NDIS to work properly. Also, one of the issues of greatest concern on the New South Wales North Coast is the lack of home care, particularly with the ageing population that we have. There's a distressing number of older Australians waiting for the care they need, and the list in my region just grows longer each year. Of course, we should judge ourselves as a nation by how we treat our elderly, yet the Liberals and Nationals have done nothing but cut aged care funding, and there is no plan to reverse those cuts. The fact is, as of June 2019, there are still 120,000 older Australians languishing, waiting for a home care package, and this includes more than the 72,000 older Australians on the wait list with no home care package at all. And shamefully, many people are dying waiting for their home care package. This is truly unacceptable. And we also have the Morrison government ignoring the calls from many people to increase Newstart. And again, I call on them to act. There is an urgent need to raise the rate of Newstart. The fact is, in my region, we have a massive housing affordability and homelessness crisis, and people receiving Centrelink benefits are the hardest hit. Families and individuals without secure full-time employment and who rely on some sort of Centrelink allowance to survive are really doing it tough. They are struggling. And with a quarter of Newstart recipients aged 55 or over, many locals who've worked all their lives are now living in poverty and struggling to find affordable accommodation. The government needs to act and urgently look at raising the rate of Newstart. The government's also failed to deliver on the NBN for Australians, in particular those Australians living in regional areas have been really hit hard. Constituents tell me constantly they're so frustrated they can't get any decent internet access. They're very slow speeds and there's lots of buffering, and the NBN is critical infrastructure for Australia's future for so many different reasons. And one particular area in my electorate, Cabarita and Hastings Point, can't even get connected to the NBN, and delays have been ongoing. Time and time again they've been told the service will be rolled out, only to be told of another delay, another excuse. One particular constituent has been in contact with my office since 2015. He was told his NBN connection was due for mid-2018, then early 2019, then mid-2019, then late 2019, and now, after more delays, we find that residents and businesses of Cabarita and Hastings Point have been told to expect connection in March 2020. That is clearly unacceptable. Now, for this constituent, who is a small business operator, the impact of these delays will have serious financial impacts and put at real risk his ability to keep trading. This is an unacceptable situation. I've made representations to the Minister. This situation must be fixed. And the Liberals and Nationals' mismanagement continues to impede the rollout of this very vital service. Put simply, locals in my area are suffering due to the faults, the slow speeds, the downtime and the poor service. In 2017 alone, complaints about the NBN increased by over 200%. It is that bad. Deputy Speaker, I remain staunchly committed to advocating for better regional services, and I believe that the North Coast deserves its fair share from Canberra. That's why I'll continue to fight for the commitments I campaign for, especially for important infrastructure projects. In fact, major infrastructure projects are important enablers of regional economies, and they also deliver many jobs during the construction phase. Indeed, we all know the Reserve Bank Governor has called on the government to invest in infrastructure, to lift employment and wages, drive economic growth, and that especially applies to our regional areas. The government must start investing very quickly in infrastructure projects. Now, in terms of the Labor election commitments in Richmond, first and foremost, the Kirkwood Road and Kennedy Drive interchanges are two of the most strategically important infrastructure projects which would ease congestion, reduce travel times and meet the growing needs of our region. It is, in fact, a game changer. These two road projects will not only create jobs and economic activity, it will, of course, lift productivity over the longer term. So many, many benefits. Now, we made a commitment that the Labor government would invest $52.2 million to progress work on the Kirkwood Road interchange and the Kennedy Drive interchange. Our region has indeed benefited from a number of major projects funded by the former Labor government. Yet at the recent federal election, only Labor committed to fund these two projects in full. It was completely ignored by the National Party. Yet I call on the government to invest in these important projects. It is vitally important for our future growth. I also remain committed to fighting for funding for the Ballina Byron Regional Airport and their much-needed runway upgrade. And I was very proud that during the election campaign, Labor committed to investing $10 million for this important project. And funding of the project will enable the widening and strengthening of the runway, which is a really crucial part of the Ballina Byron Gateway Airport's capacity to accommodate future larger domestic aircraft. We have a growing region. We have to have this runway upgraded. And it is very vital and critical to our region's thriving tourism industry. And the airport is ranked nationally in the top 10 regional airports, and it is in fact owned and operated by the Ballina Shire Council. So, Deputy Speaker, there is ample scope for greater investment now, particularly across rural and regional Australia, and I urge the government to invest in economies and in projects like the ones I've mentioned, Kirkwood Drive, Kennedy Road, and the vital upgrade to the Ballina Byron Regional Airport. In terms of the other election commitments that Labor made, I will also continue to fight for funding for Wedgetail Retreat, which specialises in palliative care in a purpose-built facility, and for Moolumbar Community Centre's food hub at the Red Cross Centre. And again, I call on the government to match those investments and invest in these important projects. I'd also like to take this opportunity to hold this government to account on the promise they did make during the election campaign, namely a new cancer treatment centre in Tweed Heads. Regional communities deserve access to the very best cancer care, and I shall continue to call on them to honour their promise to invest in this very important facility. And this is very important because we do know that the Nationals have a history of saying one thing and then doing something after the election. So I'll continue to hold this government to account on this very important election commitment. It's vital that we all do all that we can to address the difficulties that patients face in regional communities, because we know that in the regions they experience poorer health outcomes than in the cities, and patients often have to travel greater distance to access the vital treatment they need. And of course, a new facility, a radiation facility in Tweed Heads, would assist in bridging the gap when it comes to cancer care and the outcomes of patients. And I urge the government to honour that commitment, and I will keep holding them to account because we do need to have that cancer facility in our region. We see right across the board when it comes to health services some really startling and remarkable moves by this government, and they're continuing to undermine Medicare, which is devastating for the regions as well. There are currently record high out-of-pocket costs and record high waiting lists to access healthcare. Under this Prime Minister, out-of-pocket GP costs have increased from $36.45 to a record high of $39.55. And out-of-pocket specialist costs have increased from $80.20 to a record high of $91.50. And under this Prime Minister, private hospital out-of-pocket costs have increased from $308.75 to a record high of $314.50. And also under this government, private health insurance premiums have risen around 2.8%. And again, under this government, waiting times have increased to mean 1 in 4 people have not been seen on time in emergency departments or waiting for elective surgeries. This is not good enough. We need to see much more investment in our health and hospital services. Another big issue that many people in my community have, which they've raised with me many times, is about the government's dangerous plans to develop a nuclear power industry within this country. We are seeing intensifying pressure from the Liberals and Nationals at all levels of government pushing this very toxic agenda. It's one that I've raised in the past and will continue to raise. It's so important for my community, and I stand firmly with the community in firm opposition to nuclear power. We, all of us on the New South Wales North Coast, have major objections to nuclear energy because particularly the impact on coastal communities would be devastating. Nuclear power is dangerous, expensive and consumes vast amounts of precious water, which is why we're concerned about the government expanding on it when we have coastal communities like mine. And here we have a time when Australia faces increased water security threats, and yet we have this government pushing hard with this agenda for nuclear power. And again, we see it at all levels of government in New South Wales. We see it federal, state and local. They need to stop. Our community will fight them every day against this. Nuclear power is just too toxic. Deputy Speaker, I'd also like to mention, of course, some of the harsh impacts of our state Liberal national government as well, which really impacts our region. One of those is the need for more police, and we've seen under this state Liberal National government, massive cuts to our police numbers. And in my community, they blame the Nationals and the state member for Tweed who's cut those numbers. And we're just not keeping pace in terms of the fact we're one of the fastest growing regions, and we need to give our police the resources and numbers so they can do their job effectively. But the fact is, under the Nationals, locals are hurting and they're putting police officers unnecessarily in harm's way because we don't have enough police on the ground. And Deputy Speaker, as a former police officer myself, I understand the importance of having appropriate numbers of police on the beat in our communities to ensure that locals remain safe. So I've launched a community petition for more police because locals tell me their neighbourhoods and streets are being targeted by criminals who see New South Wales as a soft touch, many of them coming over the border from Queensland to commit their crimes in New South Wales. But look, I've seen firsthand the pressure our police are under, and crime is out of control in our region. Our police are combating ongoing violence, break and enters, and increasing ICE use across the North Coast. And we consistently see reports in our local media of crime being out of control. And so I will continue to stand up for our community, continue to advocate for more police across our region. It is vitally important, and I always, again, want to take this opportunity to commend our local police for the remarkable work they do. I know how hard they work. They're under very difficult circumstances with the lack of resources that they do have there. And I'd like to thank the Labor leader, Jodie McKay, and also the New South Wales Shadow Minister for the North Coast, Adam Searle, who recently came to Tweed to launch this very important community police petition, and it's an issue that we will keep talking about. Another big issue in my community that has recently been raised is a betrayal by the Tweed Nationals MP, again Jeff Provis, who has backflipped on an election commitment he made about having free parking at the new Tweed Valley Hospital. So he said in the election campaign he promised locals free parking with no time limits for patients and visitors and staff. Well, we read in the past few weeks that was just an absolute lie, and he's now backflipped on that. We now know there will be paid parking there. It really is a complete betrayal of locals, and many people are deeply concerned about it. Of course, many patients and their families, also staff as well, that they do feel totally betrayed. They were told there would be free parking there, and of course we now find out that indeed it's going to be paid parking. That will also have a massive impact on the surrounding areas in Coogin and Kingscliff, who of course will just be inundated with cars there. So again, I call on Jeff Provis and Liberal National Government to honour their election commitment for free parking at that hospital. It's vitally important and distressing so many people within our region. And Mr Deputy Speaker, I'll always continue to hold Liberal National governments to account, whether it may be at a federal or a state level. We do have so many concerns locally, so many broken promises, so many cuts to services. It is right across the board and deeply distressing our community. And speaking of our community, I would like to add, as I'm summing up, what an incredible, remarkable and diverse region we have on the New South Wales North Coast. We're very fortunate to have such active and committed, diverse community groups, sporting clubs and organisations right across the region. I'd like to mention the Richmond Community Grants Hub in my electorate, which was established...
Order. A division's been called in the House of Representatives, so proceedings of the Federation Chamber are suspended to allow members to vote, and will resume on the resumption. Order. The question is that the address be agreed to, and I call the member for Richmond in continuation.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. And look, in closing, what I would like to say is what a wonderful community we have on the far north coast of New South Wales. It is a remarkable and diverse area, and we're very fortunate to have such wonderful, committed and active and diverse community groups, individuals and sporting clubs, the organisations. They are truly remarkable, and they all have a very deep commitment to our area and to improve it. And I'd really like to mention a program, the Richmond Community Grants Hub in my electorate, which I've recently established. And it was established in response to the very growing demand from the community for more information about available funding opportunities. And I'm pleased to say that so many groups have signed up so far, and they're able to receive information about different funding opportunities that may be available to them. And it's just wonderful working with these community groups and helping them to potentially secure some of that funding as well. It has been a huge success, and I encourage any other groups that might like to get involved, please sign up to my Richmond Community Grants Hub so we can keep you informed of any potential grant opportunities that do arise. And as I say, I really look forward to working with them to secure future grant funding, so together we can make the area an even better place to live. It is truly the best place in Australia to live on the New South Wales North Coast. And Mr Deputy Speaker, it is an absolute honour to represent your community here in our federal parliament, and I again thank those people of Richmond for re-electing me as their member. It is indeed a privilege and an honour that I take very seriously. And as I say, my door is always open to them, and I'm always available here to help them, and I will keep being their strong voice in Canberra.
Worth the wait. The question is that the address be agreed to. I call a member for Gellibrand.